Did you ever think what does Russian news say about the war in Ukraine, about the protests happening inside Russia, or maybe about Mr. Zelensky? I'm sure that's pretty different from what you are seeing in your local news, but what exactly do Russian people see on their TV? In this video, we will find out. Hi, my name is Niki. On this channel I started this series What does Russian state media tell us about, and last week I asked my viewers what kind of news they want to see from Russian perspective, and I picked 5 topics for this video, leaving 2 other major news for the next episode, so be sure to subscribe to my channel if you find this video interesting to watch. And let's get started with something light, a comic news about referendum for Russians to join the Netherlands. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, like what the heck, referendum for all Russians to join Holland? Then no worries, you are not alone, because there is no single word in Russian news related to this topic. Basically, this idea comes from Dutch TV show introduced by their local comic. He says that if Russian president organizes referendums in a country where he has no territorial claims, then he technically can organize the same thing for Russian people, which he did in his comic show, introducing a really funny, well-designed video, and that video went viral internationally. And then I started to think, like, is there anything being said about this comic referendum in Russian news? And here what I found out. Like, I'm using this website of Russian Первый канал, first channel, with his really huge library of 650,000 news. If I write anything about, like, the Netherlands, Nederlanden, in Russian language, I'll find quite a lot of news, but nothing about this funny event. Like, I didn't really expect Russian state media covering this kind of funny news, but that will be really interesting to see. Now let's jump to another piece of news that hardly appears in Russian media, and I'm talking about protests happening inside Russia. Same website of Russia First channel, here I type protest, which is protest in Russian, and I pick the time duration from February 24th to the day of recording this video. What I found is 93 results of video news about protest, but interesting thing that there is no real news on protest happening in Russia. Remember, there was like long time ago, February 24th, 25th, and also beginning of March, when we had anti-war protests in Russia. Well, here it is, literally no news on that time period. The first news about protests coming from March 16th, and I think that is really interesting representation of what is happening like inside Russian media, because there are a lot of videos on protests in Europe. According to first channel in Russia, many people in Europe protest because of poor economical conditions of their countries and also because of current energy crisis. For example, check out this news. It comes from October the 2nd and says in Europe people massively protest because of inflation and coming winter. Let's see how this lady introduces this news to Russian people. Hunger, cold and humiliation. It seems this is how Europeans perceive the actions of their authorities. Massive street protests almost all over Europe. People are tired of paying fabulous sums of money for utilities and food, and they demand higher wages, but so far only prices in stores and mortgages rates are rising. Inflation overseas beats all the records for several decades as well. The American dream is getting more and more unattainable. And it will be getting even more difficult because the winter is coming. Well, I don't see anything wrong with covering this news. There indeed might be people who protesting because of this stuff, or inflation, maybe some energy crisis. But the real suspicious thing is that they are covering these protests across, let's say, Europe and America, but there is no single word on what is happening there in Russia. And when I think about that, I have a simple picture in my mind. My granny, who lives in the city of Omsk, that's a large city in Siberian part of Russia, she can turn on the TV and watch such kind of news and think that life in Europe, life in America is super bad things happen there. And at the same time, she does not see anything negative news about Russia, and she might think that everything is alright in our country. Like there is no protest happening in Russia, not at all, and the mobilization process is going alright and so on. And here I want to introduce you another YouTube channel coming from Russia. Zoomers. I'm giving him a shout out because he basically does the same thing as I do on my channel, providing you interesting inside details on what's happening in Russia.
Hey, that's right. I'm a refugee from the Russian-speaking YouTube.
My main channel is a little above 1 million subscribers, and what is that if not an indicator of the quality of content?
And you may probably ask, why the hell am I in the woods? Just hiding from mobilization.
And let me show you some headlights from my recent videos. For example, in this video, Russia is fucked in the first person, like an eyewitness. I have told you about why Russia was going to lose anyway in the war against Ukraine, how Russians are brainwashed, how the propaganda machine works, and how with its help the history is rewritten.
He recently uploaded a video about mobilization in Russia and what do people do to avoid getting mobilized. Very interesting stuff. Watch that video and please show my fellow YouTuber some love.
Link will be down below in the description box. Thank you.
By the way, that's the next topic of our video, the process of mobilization. And believe me, there's plenty of news on mobilization inside Russia. Basically, every single media in Russia explains stuff about mobilization, it says how the process is going, but let's see what exactly being said on mobilization on Russian TV. Searching news about mobilization, only for this month I see 131 results, which is actually more than the amount of news we had about protests since the beginning of this year. So that's definitely a hot topic in Russian media. May it be ready to listen intro music. People from so many different countries say they have exactly same music in their local news. Hello, it's news time on First Channel. We will tell you the most important events right now. More than 200,000 people have already arrived to the armed forces as part of partial mobilization, said Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu. He emphasized that military personnel should be sent to combat areas only after training and combat coordination. All conditions have been created for this. Trainings are held at training bases under the guidance of experienced instructors. They work out every detail, bringing everything to automatism. To this day, more than 200,000 people have arrived to the armed forces. I instructed to provide everyone with the necessary sets of clothes and other equipment. Oh mate, that is basically the main narrative in Russian news about mobilization. So what Russian people hear is everything is going according to the plan, everything is fine with mobilized people, we are providing them all the stuff that they need for basically serving the country. And that is actually quite far away from the real situation. We do have messages across the entire country that people who get mobilized, they do not have enough stuff for their service. So what we see outside the media is that our government is not able to supply our mobilized people as well as they are stating in the news.
Мы никому не нужны, подготовки ровным счетом ноль. Мы жрем то, что сами себе покупаем. Мы потратили охеренное количество бабок, чтобы просто поесть. Это же не говоря об амуниции. Просто купи себе бронежилет.
Just a few days ago, I found out that there are hundreds, or maybe even thousands of Telegram groups. These groups are mostly women who have some kind of relation to mobilized people, maybe their wives or sisters or friends, whoever they are, and they are helping their men to have all necessary supplies, starting from like medicaments, starting from clothes, food, and ending by such little things as sponge or socks or anything like underwear, which is definitely should be supplied by our government. Once I found such kind of groups, I joined one from my hometown, the city of Omsk, and I saw 17,000 people who were somehow organizing the supply to their mobilized men. As I understand, people in this group are fully aware that our government is not able to supply all the necessary stuff to soldiers, so these people are doing their best to find all necessary supplies by themselves. So that's how it looks like. This is a group from city of Omsk, and of course they do have Z as their profile picture, and they have a lot of messages asking for donations and also sharing what exactly they bought for this sum of money. For example, here they bought 2,000 pairs of socks, this amount of gloves, this amount of hats, this amount of mattresses. So you get the idea. The main narrative in Russian state media is that Russia is doing everything for people who are being mobilized, they are supplying them everything that is necessary, and at the same time there's like hundreds of such groups of support across the entire country to buy stuff for mobilized people. Well, and what about the news from the front line? Basically we had a lot of things happening in Ukraine. A few weeks ago we had news about Izium and Balakleia, and right now we are having news about Liman. Is there any information in Russian state media related to like recent Ukrainian counteroffensive or anything about Liman? Let's find out. So I searched the front line and here's the result for all the time. Let's narrow it down to 1 month. We have exactly 13 news related to the front line. Opening the most recent report from October the 2nd, 12 o'clock.
Удар ураганами по опорным пунктам ВСУ и высший пилотаж от нашей боевой авиации.
So what I see here, they say nothing about the situation on the front line. I mean, nothing about the recent changes. Maybe it's only news report from October the 2nd. Let's give a try to another searched word, maybe not frontline, but Liman. And yeah, we have a news report from October the 1st, and basically what it says is, let's translate it to English. Allied troops withdrew from Liman for more favorable borders due to the threat of encirclement. Our military department told us how the special military operation is going today. Details in the material of Alexander Alyakin.
Залпом! 333!
Because of possible threat of encirclement, the Allied troops were withdrawn from the settlement of Krasny Liman to more advantageous positions. So as I understand, the main narrative of this news about Liman and all recent changes on the front line is that Russian army is doing well, they're fighting Ukrainian nationalists well, but they have to regroup the troops to find a better position because of this threat of encirclement. So that's exactly the same narrative as they had talking about Izium and Balakleya a few weeks ago. A very interesting detail is that in such news, Russian TV provides a lot of details on what kind of equipment does Russian army use and how exactly they use it and so on and so on. I have no idea why they're doing it. Maybe they think that people that watch TV, they're getting proud to know what kind of stuff does the army uses. I don't know. Let's move to the next topic of this video, the image of Ukrainian President Mr. Zelensky in Russian TV. And we had a lot of news reports about Ukrainian presidents. Basically, every single step, every single move of Mr. Zelensky since the beginning of the war is being observed by Russian media. And after watching and reading some news on Zelensky, I have an impression that Russian media are watching for any little detail, any little thing to make fun of Ukrainian president. There are like 167 news about Zelensky since the beginning of the war, and let's open to the most recent ones. Either Zelensky will change his position, or we will wait for another president of Ukraine. This is how the press secretary of the Russian leader Dmitry Peskov reacted to Kyiv's refusal to dialogue. Earlier, Vladimir Zelensky enforced the decisions of the National Security Council of Ukraine on the impossibility of holding negotiations with Vladimir Putin. And here's the answer from Moscow. It takes two parties to negotiate, and you know that from the very beginning of the military operation, the Russian side was in favor of ensuring that the conditions put forward by the Russian side were achieved through peaceful, diplomatic means and negotiations. We will now wait for a change in the position of the current president, or we will wait for the future president of Ukraine. So basically that is a mirrored reply to the words of Zelensky, who said a few days ago that they are going to negotiate with Russia only if Russia has a different president. So Peskov says exactly same word, but like to opposite direction. Only a few hours passed after the signing ceremony in the Kremlin, and Ukrainian president was again planning to join NATO. He sent an application for a faster entry into the military alliance. And as expected, he is getting the gate again. Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, was brief and blunt. Now he said it's not the best time. The fact that there will be no suitable time for Ukraine's membership in NATO has been clear to everyone except Zelensky for a long time already. This is such a good example of very subjective and biased journalists like this lady. When I think about the news reports, I don't want to hear the subjective opinion of somebody who is presenting the news. I want to hear basically what is happening and where is happening and why that is happening. But it's not what you always can expect from Russian news reports, I guess. So let me summarize. I hope you got a good impression of what does a typical Russian person sees in the news, like my granny or somebody, let's say, from a provincial Russian city. Believe me, there is a big audience in such kind of TV channels, like this Channel First, Первый канал, or any other given Russian state media on TV. What I can surely say is that Russian government, and perhaps every single government around the world, is very, very good at picking the news and presenting it from the angle that is like most suitable for them. Anyways, I hope this video was interesting or insightful for you. Subscribe to my channel so you will not miss any future uploads. Спасибо and пока.